This is me at 5 AM on my way to the train station here in Tunis, the capital city of Tunisia, with absolutely no idea of all of the good and bad things that I have in store for me today, because I'm attempting to travel 5 hours south to a different city by train by myself without being able to speak Arabic, or even French. I had specifically been warned the previous day that trains here in Tunisia are unsafe, unreliable, and best avoided. And while yes, I would go on to find out that some of that was true, and yes, there would be times where I regretted getting myself into this whole mess, this big, dusty, metallic adventure would also go on to teach me a lot about this country and the people who live here. I had a reservation in a traditional hotel down in Sfax, a beautiful and historic city by the sea, and I intended to be staying there tonight. I had no idea what to expect from the Tunisian railway, only that I had a roughly 300-kilometer journey ahead of me through the desert, changing once, and that I was hoping that it would all work out. Or as the locals here say, Inshallah, I will make it. Welcome to Gare de Tunis, the main station here in the Tunisian capital, and where I hit the first major roadblock that could stop this mission in its tracks. Already fairly busy with human and feline activity this morning, it's a very functional and minimalist station, with the 2 ticket desks, one for national trains and one for local commuter rail tickets, and some benches for waiting on. There were a few stands by the entrance selling food and SIM cards, but nothing open at this ungodly hour. I'm trying to take the first train of the day, leaving Tunis just after 6 AM and heading south, but I've arrived extra early to try and fix problem number 1, buying a ticket. The Tunisian train network is easily one of the most comprehensive in Africa, and they even offer a pass that gives you unlimited travel on the network for 1 week for 80 Tunisian dinars, or around $25 US. And then on every train you want to ride, you have to make a reservation for roughly another 50 cents extra. Since they don't have ticket machines or online sales, and it was my first time in the country and I wanted to make sure I did everything right, I had actually been into this station 2 days ago when I first arrived in Tunisia to try and get this all sorted ahead of time. I asked for a 1-week blue card in the most rudimentary French in the world, and although I could tell the lady was being really nice and friendly with me, the amount of cupboards and boxes that she had to rummage through to find me one of these passes was definitely a sign that they never sell any of them. Eventually she did find me one, and as soon as I saw it, I realised my mistake. I had neglected to bring an ID photo, despite being warned online that I was supposed to. There was a lot of demand that I needed to go and get one right now, before she eventually consulted with a manager over the phone and sold me the pass without a photo on it. And I walked off very happy to be armed with my ticket for unlimited train travel around Tunisia, but having forgotten to make my actual reservation. So I still had to do that this morning, presuming that there was any left. So there I was, standing around in the station at just after 5 AM, trying to get a script ready in Google Translate on my phone to the effect of, "Good morning, I'd like to make a reservation on the 605 to El Jem, please," when I hear someone shouting from the corner where the ticket office is, "Monsieur, monsieur, monsieur," and the monsieurs are getting louder each time, until I look up from my phone and it's the lady from the other night who'd sold me the pass, running towards me trying to get my attention. And once she's got it, she switches to beckoning me towards the ticket office, shouting "Cachet, cachet, cachet," which I now know is the French word for stamp. And it seems that they have a rule that you can buy one of these passes without a photo, as long as the ticket office gives it this official stamp to say that they've seen your passport and that everything's okay, which I didn't have until she pulled me over this morning and put it on there for me. She then sold me the reservation that I wanted in 1 second flat, and I said merci a bunch of times and walked out to find my platform, armed with my freshly stamped pass and reservation slip, very excited to start my journey into the unknown, wondering if my train would arrive on time and wondering what it would be like on board if it did arrive. But while I was stood there waiting on the platform, it sunk in that not only had she recognised me across the station floor, but also remembered selling me the unstamped pass and cared enough that I might get into a pickle trying to use an invalid ticket that she made the extra effort to fix it for me. And this wouldn't even end up being the only remarkable interaction that I had with Tunisian Railways staff during my journey today. While I'm waiting for this train, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to the sponsor of this video, which is Bubble. If there's one thing I've learned from traveling all around the world, it's that languages open doors for you. I see it in my life in Germany, where I can do and enjoy so much more now that I'm bilingual. And you can also see it in videos like this one, where my embarrassing attempts at the French language left a lot of doors closed to me, which is why I'm so happy to be partnered with Babbel, one of the top language learning apps in the world. Learning another language can be so good for your career, your social life, and all of your future travels, but I know firsthand that it's really hard to know where to start. But now that I have Babbel on my phone, it's really easy to spend every little 15 or 20-minute gap in the day that I have trying to learn a third language, safe in the knowledge that all of their courses are crafted by real language experts and are actually bringing me on my way to having real conversations in other countries. The app itself is really intuitive to use and does a great job at tracking your progress through actual topics that you'll find useful on your language learning journey. So if you'd like to learn a second, third, or even a 15th language in a fun and motivating way, then check out Babbel at the link in the description, where you can get a massive 60% off your subscription and take the first steps down the road to speaking your dream target language, which, as you'll see, is probably something that I should have done with French before coming to Tunisia. My first Tunisian train of the day, in contrast to what I'd be experiencing later, actually showed up pretty punctually, with the only major surprise to this soft European being the sight of people trying to get on before it had stopped moving, which signalled to me that there must be a mad rush for seats and that I should go try to claim one as quickly as possible too. Inside, the train was, yes, a little bit worn out and dusty, but to be honest, totally fine, and I was even able to get a whole row to myself to begin with. And as we pulled out of Tunis, pretty much on schedule, I sat and wondered what the rest of the journey had in store for me. Thankfully, the absolute pitch black era of this journey didn't last too much longer, and pretty soon we were out of the city, having made a couple of intermediate stops in the Tunis suburbs, watching as the first embers of daylight faintly illuminated the lush green landscapes around us. At this point, I noticed people continually getting up to go and smoke down at the end of the carriage, which at first strikes me as unusual on a train, but then I noticed that it's probably not such a major thing because our carriage has plenty of ventilation, given that it's missing a door. Again, this is kind of unusual and novel to me, and I couldn't resist going down to take a couple of pictures and breathe in some fresh air of my own out the side of the train, and I got to spend some time down there soaking in the sunrise without a pane of glass in the way, holding on pretty tightly the entire time to the other side of the carriage, of course. By this time, the early morning sun was flooding the carriage, and I got to get a proper look at the interior. I hadn't encountered the one bad feature of the train yet, so I was still really impressed. Comfy seats with movable armrests, enough space on the luggage racks above my head for my 30-litre backpack, and plenty of legroom. Some of the seats were a little bit beaten up and couldn't come out of recline mode anymore, but considering how cheaply you can travel around Tunisia for a whole week on these trains, it was not bad at all. I was still kind of anxious about what would happen when I tried to transfer trains in El Jem later. Would I be able to make a reservation for the next train there, and would it show up on time? But this was out of my hands for now, allowing me to sit back and watch the world go by. Work on the railways here in Tunisia was started in Tunis in the 1870s, and it continued to expand across the country in the coming decades, mostly due to the colonial French powers wanting to transport freight from the mines in the south of the country to the port cities on the Mediterranean coast using steam trains. They even built a railway line to connect Tunis all the way to the neighbouring countries Algeria and Morocco, and wanted to expand the network to reach their other colonies further south in West Africa, forming a kind of trans-Saharan railway. But because of such situations as it's a desert, you're at war, and it's a desert, it seems that they might have had second thoughts about building all of that. Since the 1950s, the once more independent Tunisia has gradually invested in modernising the network, which now carries millions of passengers every year, including the odd English tourist who gets the chance to travel around this amazing country while sitting back, drinking in the sunrise, and enjoying the views that are so different from those back home. The only bad thing on this first train of the day was the toilet. Okay, so hope that nobody tries to come in, I guess, and hope that I don't need to wash my hands. To be fair, I'm sure that this bathroom has seen better days, but the idea that anybody would have ever wanted to shave in here did seem particularly ambitious to me. Back in my seat, I used my trusty hand gel, showed my pass and reservation to a very polite train guard in smart clothing, and went back to observing the world around me outside the window as we passed through olive groves, some cities with medium-sized railway stations, and some tiny villages with very cute middle of nowhere stations. We had even been making good time, and as far as I could tell, we'd hit most of these intermediate stops on timetable. I'd also observed how Tunisian trains don't wait for so long in each station, which is presumably the cause of the mad dash to get on board when they're approaching. But probably my favourite part of Tunisian train culture so far was the very respectful quiet on board. Nobody said a peep to each other or talked on the phone, and it was dead silent, to the extent that I'd have felt bad talking to the camera. As we went further south and the number of people on board thinned out more and more, and the midday sun started to drown us in light, it was a pretty serene experience. The only thing that didn't really fit the scene was the fact that the heating was switched on, which I couldn't really understand and it made me kind of uncomfortable. Thankfully, that wouldn't be my problem for much longer, as my midday break in the city of Jem was coming up. I just about squeezed off while people were starting to pile onto the train. And very happy with the progress I've made so far and hoping that it would continue going so well, I watched it pull away, of course with a couple more doors left open for good measure. Now, I didn't absolutely have to transfer here in Jem, but I kind of wanted to break the journey up and to bring you two different types of trains in this video, as well as the very classic station building. There is also one kind of interesting thing here in Jem, which I will be bringing you in a separate video, so don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss that. But for now, this whole plan to take a couple of hours break here had caused me one major problem: getting my reservation for the next train down to Sfax. The station here did have a ticket office, and I confidently walked up with a couple of French words in my head to try to get a reservation, but no dice. I kind of got the impression that the lady there had understood my request, but that there was some problem or some other reason that she couldn't sell it to me, but I just didn't have the French level to understand what she was trying to explain to me. So I just said merci and left and let them serve the rest of the queue, while I went outside and tried to prepare a whole speech in Google Translate on my phone to try and figure out what was going on. I was kind of nervous that I'd done something wrong, or that my pass was invalid, or tickets had sold out, or the next train was cancelled, or I just wasn't allowed on it for some reason. And I, of course, really wanted to make it down to Sfax, where I had a hotel reservation, and not get stuck here, where I didn't. So I was a bit anxious at this point, but I really needn't have been, because when I walked back inside, the lady at the ticket office beckoned me right over and held her phone up to the glass. And what she was trying to show me was Google Translate. While I was gone, she typed out what she was trying to explain to me into her phone and translated it into English for me, just as I was trying to do for her. And so I kind of smiled and held my phone up to the glass too, and we had this really nice kind of laughing and smiling at each other moment, just going like, oh, we tried to solve this in the exact same way. What I read off her phone was that she could sell me a reservation, just not yet. Sales for that train didn't open until 30 minutes before the scheduled departure time. So I'm not sure why that is, what kind of policy it is to only sell last minute tickets, but it definitely did set my mind at ease that I hadn't stranded myself in Jem. And I just came back a bit later, right before the timetable departure time, and I got my reservation very easily. And her translating that message for me was just another really nice moment of, okay, this guy in front of me is a completely lost tourist, doesn't know what he's doing, doesn't even speak the language. Let's put in some extra effort to help him out and make sure that he has a good and safe time in our country, which felt really good. Top class hosts, the Tunisians. What didn't feel so good was how late this train was running and just how hot it was outside while waiting for it. After the scheduled departure time came and went with no train, I spent probably about another 2 hours hanging out with the cats and the bins in the shade behind the station, until finally me and all the other disgruntled passengers heard the train rolling up. As soon as I saw it, I thought that my worries were over and that I would definitely make it down as far as Sfax tonight. But I didn't realise that pretty soon I'd be faced with the exact opposite problem. After queuing in an orderly manner to get on and squeezing past the official smoking area, I got my first look at this carriage, which seemed slightly newer than the last one. And again, pretty busy, although I was able to get a pair of seats to myself. Still some chairs that I think weren't able to unrecline anymore, but that's not a big deal, and I did have a footrest this time, and again, decent space for bags overhead. In the final hour of my solo journey through Tunisia by train, I enjoyed more of the views, which were getting more deserty, predictably, the further south we went. And I did have a little walk around the train where I found what looks like the remnants of an old cafe car, which would have been really nice to see in use. Although I can see why it would be annoying to the locals who rely on these services to get around, for me as a tourist, the whole being a couple of hours behind schedule thing wasn't a big deal at this point. And since the train did come in the end, it just added to the story of my big mad train through the desert adventure. Let me know in the comments, by the way, if so far this video has made you want to go there and have a solo trip of your own around Tunisia. I know people mostly go to the beach resorts in the north or on coach tours around the whole country, but I found it to be one of those countries that really rewards putting in the extra effort to try and navigate it alone. Not always easy, but so far, always worth it, and usually with a great deal of support and friendliness from the locals. Or, like I said, if you'd rather leave all of the legwork to me, then feel free to subscribe to the channel to keep up with my journeys from around the world. As we approach Sfax, I notice all the people who are already standing up and queuing to get off, and I decided it might be smart to join them. The train stops, and we all get off in a very orderly fashion. Except me. I get a train door slammed in my face. Absolutely typical. I spend all day thinking about how it's so strange to me that the train doors are open, and then at the exact last millisecond that I need it to stay open so that I can get off at my destination, it slams shut, and I can't get it back open, nor can anybody waiting outside. By the time I make it around to the other door, it's already blocked by a constant stream of suitcases and children being passed up by people who are boarding the train. And I'm stood there watching all of this, thinking, oh god, am I gonna have to force my way off somehow? These trains don't wait around for long, and while it may be expected that locals would jump off while it's moving, I, as the aforementioned soft European, would probably chicken out and end up in completely the wrong city. But I tactfully lend a hand lifting up suitcases for a minute until I eventually spot a gap where I can jump down. Relieved and elated, taking one last look at the sandy old iron horse that brought me all this way, walking out of the station and into the 1,000-year-old city of Sfax, knowing that my big mad adventure not only worked out but also earned me a couple of fun stories. I walk up through the city's historic old Medina, find my hotel, collect the world's largest room key, and drop my backpack in my room before heading back out to enjoy a feast fitting for the kind of day I'd had. Safe in the knowledge that I'll always have this, my Carte Bleu, my 1-week travel pass on the Tunisian railways, as a souvenir. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to click the link in the description to get 60% off of your subscription to Babbel on your way to speaking a new language, and I'll see you next time.